Blood pooled beneath the outlaw's fingers as he collapsed at her gate. A $500 bounty, 3 bullets in his chest, and eyes that didn't match the wanted poster's claims of cold-blooded killer. Kristen Gallagher had 60 seconds to decide. Turn him in or bet her life he's innocent.
Hello. If you believe every underdog deserves to be seen and lifted up, your support means more than you know. Hitting 1,000 subscribers isn't just a number for us, it's what allows these real, hopeful stories to reach people who might desperately need them to stay motivated. Your one click could be the reason someone keeps going. Please help us reach more hearts by subscribing now.
The September sun hadn't yet broken over the Absurica Range when Jonathan Kirby collapsed against the split-rail fence, his vision narrowing to a dark tunnel. Blood seeped through his fingers where he clutched his chest, 3 bullets finding their mark during the botched bank raid in Livingston. The posse's baying hounds echoed across the Yellowstone River Valley, maybe half a mile behind now, closing fast. Through the haze of pain and exhaustion, he spotted smoke curling from a distant ranch house chimney. His last chance. Jonathan forced his legs to move, each step an agony that threatened to drop him permanently. The year was 1883, and the wanted posters plastered across Montana territory promised $500 for Jonathan Kirby, dead or alive, accused murderer and outlaw. 3 days running had brought him here, to this nameless ranch, to die or survive by the mercy of strangers. Don't move. The woman's voice cut sharp through the morning air. Jonathan looked up to find a rifle barrel pointed at his chest, and behind it, a slender figure with auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid. Her eyes were gray-green, steady and unafraid, taking in his blood-stained shirt and the desperate exhaustion carved into his face. "Ma'am," he managed, voice barely a rasp. "I know what the posters say. I can read." Kristen Gallagher didn't lower the Winchester, but something flickered across her expression as she studied him. The wanted poster descriptions called Jonathan Kirby cold-blooded, merciless, a killer without conscience. The man swaying before her looked haunted, yes, but not cruel. His eyes held pain that seemed deeper than bullet wounds. "Then you know the bounty," Jonathan said, his knees beginning to buckle. "Turn me in if you want. Just make it quick." Jonathan woke to the smell of carbolic and whiskey, his chest wrapped tight in clean bandages. Panic seized him. He reached instinctively for his gun, finding only empty air. His eyes snapped open to find Kristen Gallagher sitting beside the bed, a kerosene lamp casting soft light across her weathered hands as she stitched a torn shirt. "Easy," she said without looking up. "You've been fever dreaming for 2 days. Your gun's on the mantel where you can't shoot me by accident." "Why?" Jonathan's throat felt like sandpaper. The bounty alone could save a struggling ranch for months. Kristen finally met his gaze. "I buried my husband 2 years ago. Learned to read people in the silence after. You talk in your sleep, Mr. Kirby. And men who murder in cold blood don't spend their fever dreams begging forgiveness for failing to save someone named Samuel Porter." The name hit Jonathan like a fist. He turned his face away, jaw tight. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Then tell me." Kristen set down her sewing. "Because Sheriff Vernon Sidwell came through here 3 months back, pressuring me to sell my land to the railroad. When I refused, he made it clear accidents happen to stubborn widows." She leaned forward. "The same Sheriff Sidwell whose name you've been cursing for 48 hours straight." Jonathan's eyes snapped back to hers, seeing the intelligence there, the careful courage of a woman who'd learned to survive alone in hard country. Maybe it was the fever still burning through him, or maybe it was the bone-deep exhaustion of running. But he found himself speaking the truth for the first time in months. "Sidwell murdered Samuel Porter in cold blood. I witnessed it. Everything after, the accusations, the bounty, all of it. That's him covering his tracks." The afternoon sun slanted through the cabin's single window as Jonathan sat at Kristen's table, still weak but coherent for the first time since his arrival. Tommy Reeves, Kristen's 19-year-old ranch hand, stood by the door, arms crossed, skepticism written across his sun-weathered face. "You're asking us to believe a territorial sheriff is orchestrating land seizures for the railroad," Tommy said flatly. "That's a hell of a story from a wanted man." "It's the truth." Jonathan's voice was steady despite his exhaustion. "Samuel Porter refused to sell his ranch to Northern Pacific. Said his family had worked that land for 15 years, and no railroad was taking it. I was there delivering cattle when Sidwell arrived with 2 deputies. He paused, the memory clearly painful. Samuel stood his ground. Sidwell shot him point blank, then turned his gun on me. I managed to get to my horse, but not before taking a bullet in the leg. Kristen refilled Jonathan's coffee cup, her expression thoughtful. And the bank robbery wasn't after money. Jonathan met her eyes. Sidwell keeps records of his land deals in a safe at the Billings Bank. I needed proof, deeds, correspondence, anything showing the conspiracy. It went wrong when a clerk triggered the alarm early. So now you're branded a murderer and a thief, Kristen said quietly, while Sidwell continues his operation. Which is why I need to leave. Jonathan started to rise, wincing at the pull of his wounds. Every hour I'm here puts you in danger. If Sidwell learns you sheltered me. Sit down. Kristen's tone brooked no argument. I don't abandon people, especially when they're right about something that affects my land too. She glanced at Tommy. How far to Sarah Porter's place in Billings? Tommy's eyes widened. Samuel's widow? Maybe 12 miles, but if anyone has evidence of Sidwell's threats, it would be her. Kristen continued. Letters, documents, anything Samuel might have kept. Jonathan shook his head. You can't go to Billings. If Sidwell suspects you're helping me, he already suspects I'm trouble because I won't sell. Kristen's jaw set with determination. Besides, who's going to question a widow visiting another widow to discuss possibly selling her ranch? She let that sink in. I'll tell anyone who asks that I'm finally considering Northern Pacific's offer. Need advice from someone who's been through it. That's actually smart, Tommy admitted reluctantly. Though I don't like you going alone. You're staying here to make sure our guest doesn't bleed to death or do something stupid like trying to leave. Kristen turned back to Jonathan. How long before you can ride? With proper rest? A week, maybe less. He studied her face, seeing the intelligence and courage there. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. Kristen was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. My husband died because a lumber company cut corners on equipment safety. Everyone knew. Nobody spoke up, and he paid the price for their silence. Her gray-green eyes hardened. I won't be silent while Sidwell murders honest ranchers and calls it progress. And I don't believe you're what those posters claim. Jonathan felt something shift in his chest, not pain from his wounds, but something else entirely. Hope, perhaps, or the first stirring of trust after months of betrayal. When this is over, he said carefully, if I survive it, may I come back here? Kristen's expression softened into something that might have been a smile. You better, Jonathan Kirby. I don't save men's lives just to have them disappear. If Jonathan and Kristen's fight against corruption has you holding your breath, subscribe now, because what happens when Kristen rides into Billings will change everything. Kristen rode into Billings 3 days later, the town bustling with morning commerce as wagons rolled down the wide dirt street. She dressed carefully, her best morning dress, hair pinned properly, playing the part of respectable widow considering a difficult decision. No one would suspect her saddlebags carried a loaded derringer and determination sharp as a skinning knife. Sarah Porter's modest home sat at the edge of town, its small garden meticulously maintained despite the grief that haunted its windows. Kristen knocked softly, and when the door opened, she found herself facing a woman perhaps 40 years old, dark hair streaked with premature gray, eyes that had seen too much sorrow. Mrs. Porter? My name is Kristen Gallagher. I wonder if we might speak privately about Sheriff Sidwell and the railroad. Sarah's face went pale. She glanced past Kristen to the empty street, then quickly ushered her inside. You shouldn't say such things where people can hear. Then let's speak where they can't. Kristen's voice was gentle but firm. I'm sheltering Jonathan Kirby. He told me what really happened to your husband. Sarah's composure cracked. She sank into a chair, tears streaming down her face. Samuel kept a journal, she whispered. Documented every threat Sidwell made, every visit, every warning. I was too terrified to come forward. Sidwell said if I spoke, I'd join my husband in the ground. Her hands trembled as she retrieved a leather-bound book from beneath a floorboard. But I couldn't destroy it either. Samuel died for refusing to be bullied. His truth deserves to live. Meanwhile, at the ranch, Tommy burst into the cabin, his face urgent. Riders coming. 4 of them, led by Deputy Miles Darren. Jonathan struggled to his feet, reaching for his gun. The root cellar beneath the barn. No time, Tommy said. They're already at the gate. Jonathan's mind raced. If Darren found him here, Kristen would be implicated as an accomplice. Everything depended on what happened in the next 60 seconds, and he was still too weak to run, too outnumbered to fight. The sound of boots on the porch ended all options. Deputy Miles Darren kicked open the door, revolver drawn, 2 men flanking him. His eyes locked on Jonathan immediately, a predatory smile spreading across his weathered face. Well, the famous Jonathan Kirby, looking a bit worse for wear. Tommy stepped forward, hands raised. He just showed up this morning, deputy. We were about to. Darren's backhand sent Tommy sprawling. Shut your mouth, boy. He advanced on Jonathan, who stood swaying, one hand pressed to his barely healed wounds. Sheriff Sidwell's going to be real pleased. There's a hanging rope with your name on it. Jonathan didn't resist as rough hands yanked his arms behind him, iron shackles biting into his wrists. Each movement sent fire through his chest, but he kept his face blank, revealing nothing. They threw him into the back of a wagon like a sack of grain, and Darren climbed up beside the driver. Move out, Darren ordered. We'll have him in Billings by nightfall. The wagon had rolled perhaps a quarter mile when a single rifle shot cracked the air. The driver jerked the reins, and Darren's hand went to his gun as Kristen Gallagher rode up hard, the Winchester still smoking in her hands. That's my prisoner, she said coldly, and my bounty. Darren's face flushed crimson. What the hell are you talking about, woman? Kristen reached into her saddlebag, producing a forged letter with an impressive territorial seal, Oliver Bradshaw's handiwork from the land office. I've been negotiating directly with Marshal Hayes for an increased reward. 500 isn't enough for the trouble of keeping a wounded outlaw alive for 10 days. Her eyes were ice. But if you'd like to explain to the marshal why you're interfering with his investigation, I'm sure Sheriff Sidwell would appreciate the attention. The Absarica Mountains rose like granite walls around them, pine-scented air thin and cold at altitude. 3 days since Jonathan's midnight escape from the Billings jail, 3 days of hard riding through treacherous passes with Sidwell's expanded posse somewhere behind them. Tommy had stayed behind to manage the ranch and deflect suspicion, leaving Jonathan and Kristen alone in the wilderness. Your wounds bleeding again, Kristen observed as they made camp in a shallow cave, the kind of shelter that offered protection from wind but precious little warmth. Jonathan pressed his hand to his chest, feeling fresh dampness seep through the bandage. I'll survive. You'd better. Kristen's tone was sharp, but her hands were gentle as she unwrapped the soaked cloth. Because I didn't risk everything to watch you die of stubbornness in these mountains. That night, as temperature dropped and their single blanket proved inadequate, necessity overrode propriety. They shared body heat. Kristen's back pressed against Jonathan's chest, his arm wrapped carefully around her waist to avoid his wound. In the darkness, barriers dissolved. Tell me about before, Kristen said softly. Before Sidwell, before all this. Who were you? Jonathan's voice was quiet against her hair. Honest. Boring, probably. Worked as foreman on the Porter Ranch, saved my wages, planned to buy my own place someday. He paused. Had a girl I was courting back in Bozeman. She wouldn't even look at me once the posters went up. Her loss, Kristen murmured. And now? His question hung in the cold air. What happens if we actually survive this? Kristen turned in his arms, her face inches from his. Then we build something worth surviving for. Jonathan and Kristen are running out of time and options. Subscribe now. The courthouse showdown will leave you breathless, and you won't want to miss a single shot. Dawn broke over Billings as Jonathan and Kristen, faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats, slipped through the alley behind the courthouse. Oliver Bradshaw waited at the back in trance, his face pale with nervous energy. Marshal Hayes is inside, Oliver whispered. But Sidwell's been watching the building since yesterday. He knows something's happening. Inside, Territorial Marshal Duncan Hayes, a broad-shouldered man with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen every kind of frontier justice, examined Samuel Porter's journal with methodical care. This is damning evidence, he said finally. Sheriff Sidwell, you're under arrest for. Glass exploded inward as bullets tore through the courthouse windows. Hayes dove for cover, drawing his revolver as chaos erupted on Main Street. Sidwell's deputies had positioned themselves on rooftops, turning the town center into a killing field. Out the back, Hayes shouted, returning fire. They burst into the street just as more gunshots rang out. Jonathan saw the muzzle flash, saw the bullet's trajectory toward Kristen's chest, and moved without thinking. He shoved her aside, but the round caught her shoulder instead, spinning her backward into his arms. No, no, no. Jonathan pressed his hand against the wound, blood hot and slick between his fingers. Kristen's face had gone white, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The land office, she managed through gritted teeth. Sidwell's running. Jonathan looked up to see smoke billowing from the building across the street, flames already licking at the wooden frame. Inside were the deed records, the documented proof of every fraudulent seizure. Kristen gripped his shirt. Go. Finish this. I can't leave you. You have to. Her gray-green eyes burned with fierce determination. End him, Jonathan. For Samuel. For all of us. Jonathan emerged from the burning land office, deed box clutched against his chest, his shirt smoldering as the roof collapsed behind him in a shower of sparks. Deputy Darren lay dead in the street, shot by Marshal Hayes. Two other deputies knelt with hands raised, surrounded by townspeople who'd finally found their courage. Vernon Sidwell sat slumped against a horse trough, blood seeping from a leg wound. His reign of terror ended by a single well-placed shot from the marshal. But Jonathan saw none of it. He ran to where Doc Miller worked on Kristen, her face pale as parchment against the dusty street. Tell me she lives, he rasped, dropping to his knees beside her. Bullet passed clean through, the doctor said, wrapping the wound. She's lost blood, but she's strong. She'll recover. 3 days later, Kristen woke in the boarding house to find Jonathan asleep in the chair beside her bed, his hand wrapped around hers. His face was haggard, stubbled, marked by exhaustion that spoke of a vigil kept without pause. Jonathan, she whispered. His eyes snapped open, and the relief that flooded his face made her chest tighten. You're awake. Thank God, you're awake. Did we win? We won. He produced a folded document. Her ranch deed, legally secured, all fraudulent claims dismissed. Your land is yours. No one can take it now. Kristen's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to be even anymore. I want to be partners. Jonathan's response was to lean forward and kiss her, gentle and careful, a promise sealed between two people who'd fought their way back from the edge of destruction. Outside the window, Marshal Hayes arrested the last of Sidwell's conspirators while the town of Billings began the slow process of healing. Spring 1884 arrived with an explosion of wildflowers across the Montana grasslands, transforming the Gallagher Kirby Ranch into a patchwork of purple lupin and golden arrowleaf. Jonathan stood on the newly expanded porch, watching the sun paint the Absarica peaks in shades of rose and amber. The cattle herd had grown to 40 head, the barns stood solid and weatherproof, and the fences stretched strong across land that now belonged to them without question or threat. Tommy managed the hands with quiet competence, while Sarah Porter had taken a position keeping their accounts, her grief slowly softening into something like peace. The door opened behind him, and Kristen emerged, her hand resting unconsciously on the slight swell of her abdomen, a secret they'd shared for only 2 weeks, a future taking shape beneath her heart. Thinking, she asked, settling into the rocking chair beside his. Remembering, Jonathan corrected, taking her hand. The simple gold band on her finger caught the fading light, a symbol of the quiet wedding they'd held last month with half of Billings in attendance. I came to your ranch fighting to stay awake, certain that closing my eyes meant death. Kristen squeezed his fingers. And now I know what safe actually means. Jonathan's voice was thick with emotion. It's not hiding or running. It's not even surviving. He looked at her, this woman who'd bet everything on a dying outlaw's innocence. It's home. It's waking up beside you every morning and knowing I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. Inside, the cradle Jonathan had crafted from pine sat ready in the corner, waiting. Outside, the land stretched fertile and free beneath the endless Montana sky. There's to build upon, there's to defend, there's to pass down. The outlaw had finally stopped running. He'd found something worth staying for. Jonathan and Kristen's journey from bullets to belonging proves love can grow even in the hardest soil. Subscribe for more stories where survival becomes something beautiful. You won't regret it.
If you enjoyed this story, we appreciate you a whole lot and look forward to connecting with you as we build a community on this channel. Every day, we will put out more stories, So we need your support. Help us by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. You won't miss any new exciting videos. Check out the next video. You'll love it!